to thank you. First of all, thank you for bringing this to the point where we have an opportunity to vote on any number of different things. I was listening to Senator Hagel, who, together with Senator Webb, comes from a special place on this. And I really would ask my colleagues to sort of stop and try to really grab onto the reality check that ought to hit every one of us in the gut here. 1971, when I came back from Vietnam, I engaged in what remains controversial effort. I spoke out as a young veteran again, but I spoke the truth and I spoke my heart. And history has underscored that everything I said then, even the training manuals of the Army, were changed to reflect what happened there. It was true. And in recent months, I've met with increasing numbers of Iraqi veterans who come to my office, very different in sort of deportment and makeup from folks 35 years ago or more, but equally earnest and equally concerned about what's happening over there. Senator Dodd and I met a young man in Iraq a number of weeks ago. Brian Freeman, Chris has mentioned him on Meet the Press and elsewhere. He came up to us at the landing spot, at the landing zone, Washington there, in the green zone. In the night, he was about to ship out to go home for leave, and he was seeking us out. And he gave us his card, and Chris has communicated with him, and he told us about his opposition to what was going on there, the missions that he was on, what he was being asked to do, what his troops were being asked to do. He came back here and he visited his 14-month-old daughter, his four-year-old son, and then he went back to Iraq and he was killed just the other day. Now that's being repeated for families all across this country. And I have to tell you, the question that I asked back in 1971, which some people have asked me a few times about as I've traveled around the country, is as relevant today as it was then. How do you ask a man to be the last to die for a mistake? Now, how many of you here at this table believe what's happening there is a mistake today? How many of you here believe that there are just not enough troops with 21,000 or more to pacify Iraq? If the answer to that question is there are not enough troops to pacify Iraq, then the question is, what are we doing? What are we asking those troops to do? That's the question. If that were your son or daughter, and it is Senator Webb's, we're asking them to serve their country, and they do so with honor and with courage. They're remarkable young people. The best we've ever had, in my judgment. Best trained, most capable, unbelievably patriotic, putting their lives on the line. But, folks, we're responsible here. We sent them there. We authorized it. A mistake, in my judgment. I take responsibility for that. But the responsibility is even greater now to get this right. Senator Sununu, you said, we got to have a debate. We don't have to have a debate. We've got to get it right. That's our obligation. Get it right for those troops. And if you believe in your heart and in your gut that this president is not getting it right, and this administration is not getting right, then we have an obligation to do so. It really is that simple. You got to take away the politics and take away the niceties and take away all this sort of fool the role of Washington. I'm uncomfortable with this resolution for the simple reason that it is non-binding, but I also recognize what the chairman said. We're not going to get a cutoff date or another policy in the next week. And we have an obligation to try to register something. There's a part of me that'd like to vote against it because of the symbolism. But it's the first step. us agree we're going to come back here. In my judgment, it's a message, and the message will be heard, but that floats away very fast because we have an obligation to come back immediately after that with what are we really going to do. Now, I have one amendment here that seeks to do something real further, and I have another amendment I'm going to offer that I'm not going to offer today. I'm circulating it. But let me ask my colleagues, you've got to deal with reality here. Almost every judgment that we have been given for the last months has been wrong. Almost every judgment given us over 3 years has been wrong. Do we just sit here and ignore that and tell the troops go out there despite how wrong it's been? Senator Lugar said a little while ago that he's not confident the president's plan will work. I'll tell you what, I'm confident it will not work. I am confident it will not work. Unless, and here's the big unless the Iraqis themselves make the decisions necessary to resolve the politics. This goes back, Bali Nasser was sitting there, wrote about it. It goes back, this is about Karbala in 682 CE, when a guy named Hussein, who was the grandson of Ali, the caliphate, got murdered, killed. And the result was, and he was with 72 defenders. Does that number ring a bell as to why there are now 72 virgins talked about in the context of martyrdom? Because that was the original martyrdom in 682. And they cut off all their heads, and they left all their bodies in the desert when they killed them. And they took their heads to Najaf and put them on a post, and then they took them to Damascus. And that was the great divide between Shiism and Sunnism. And you could look at Ashura, which is the great sort of holy celebration of Shiism, which takes place in a few days. And you can see the distinction between Shia and Sunni that is 1,500 years or more old. We're trying to step into the middle of that. Our troops are going to go in there and take on Shia, who are viewed as the protectors of Shia against Sunni in the militias, because that's where they get their protection, and we're going to start taking them out. What do you think the message is in the streets of Iraq when that happens? Folks,